Welcome to Conscious Conversations, a place where East meets West, a place where conversations and ideas will challenge your minds, expand your consciousness, awaken your heart, and make you think more deeply about yourself and the world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conscious Conversations. I'm Anthony Profeta here with co-host Wes Gordon. How are you this week, Wes?
Good, very good.
Good. Always good to see you, talk with you. We had a lovely weekend this weekend at the conference, being able to, spend some time together and meet some wonderful people who came by. So thank you, everyone who did attend, and we do appreciate that, and we do appreciate the Ancient Healings Conference for having been our sponsors.
Yes.
But now today, we wanted to talk a little bit about a very interesting and sometimes also difficult teaching to understand that comes from the teachings of Jesus, from Christ, in which there is a period, there's a story in two of the Gospels. It's in Matthew and it's in Luke, in which Jesus calls a disciple. He says, "Come follow me," to a man. And the man says, "Lord, wait, I want to go bury my father first."
Right.
And then Jesus says to him in reply, "Let the dead bury the dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." And now some people hear this and they think, what is this thing? Let the dead bury the dead. And some people even think, well, Jesus is sort of very harsh and callous. He's sort of cold and uncaring that this person's father died. He's telling him, don't even go bury the man. So there's like all these sort of different aspects of what is going on with this teaching of Jesus. What does he mean by this? And when you look into it, there are some scholars who translate that as Jesus is giving a teaching to this man in the sense that he's trying to tell him that there are responsibilities that are more important than earthly responsibilities. So Jesus was calling him to come follow God. But the man said, "Oh, let me go take care of my other things before I come and, give myself to God." And some people say Jesus saying, "Let the dead bury the dead," is saying to the man, "Hey, listen, those other things that you have to take care of are not as important as coming to serve God itself. And that should be your primary goal." In fact, Jesus' main teaching is, love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and let the kingdom of God be what you seek first.
Right.
And then let everything else, let that be your primary motivation. So some say Jesus is saying, some scholars interpret it, he's saying, to the man, hey, by saying, hey, I'll go do this later, let me go bury the dead first, you're ignoring your spiritual responsibilities. And so he was trying to tell the man, stay true to your spiritual calling. But there is a deeper teaching that some people don't grasp when they read through this thing.
Right.
And it's a deeper teaching of that the majority of people out there in the world are spiritually dead.
Right.
They don't have true life within them. Because another teaching of Christ is that I've come to give you life, and I've come to give it to you more abundantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people say that when Jesus is saying, let the dead bury the dead, he's saying, let the spiritually dead bury the physically dead.
Right.
Let them take care of that. But, he saw something within the man, which is why he called him to follow.
Right.
And he's saying to him, hey, listen, you got something. So you have a spark in you that if you follow me could, awaken to even greater greatness and give you life more abundantly. So let those who are spiritually dead worry about earthly matters. Be in the world, but not of it.
Right.
And being in the world, while we're here in the world, we should be spiritualizing ourselves to try and live more fully from that, or raise ourselves from the spiritually dead into a spiritually alive being. But what is your take on all this? Let the dead bury the dead.
Oh, it's deep and vast, and it is a strong, powerful message. I mean, that's a tall order.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go one-on-one with the Christ message, even outside of the church, just go deep into the spiritual mysticism part of it. It gets to be hard. I mean, he told that one young man, go and sell all that you have and follow me. And the kid was like, whoa, I want to be part of this, but that's not a little too much. Yeah. And then you also say many times, many are called, but few are chosen. The way is very hard. The
way is narrow.
Right. And yeah, this is not an easy situation, but it's kind of like once you start to understand where Christ was coming from, he was so elevated in spirit. He was seeing a spiritual world
all around them.
And he was trying to convey that to other people, and they're thinking all materialistic. They're like, you come to be the king. He didn't turn around and say, no, I've come to be the spiritual king.
Right.
You know, they were thinking they were going to replace the Romans. So,
overthrow the Roman Empire. And
so he was coming from a spiritual standpoint on just about everything, and then he would sometimes drop back and explain some of it to his disciples. But he didn't go super deep that we know of, at least in the books.
No, he did say, though, my kingdom is not of this world.
Of this world, exactly. And then most people want to play that off as what world, and they give it a whole nother spin.
Right.
But absolutely. And when I read this, I was like, well, that's, that justifies or explains part of the conversion or the repenting or the rebirth. You must be born again. Like Nicodemus said, what are you talking about? Well, that was another spiritual concept.
Right.
Like,
born spiritually. Yeah,
I can't go back into my mother's womb. What are you talking about? So you have to be born spiritually. Well, it takes an experience. You have to have an experience that's beyond normal for this, I feel like, for this, you to start down this path.
Right.
A lot of people just think if I'm just going to be a good person, do the 10 Commandments and mind my business and try to be as polite and kind as possible, that somehow I'm going to be elevated to heaven and I'm totally spiritual. I'm sorry, that's not completely correct. That's not true. You're just a good human being. You've raised your consciousness to a level of being a civilized human.
Yeah.
If you follow the 10 Commandments, which was under the law. Grace is under spirit. And that's what Christ was trying to point out, that most people aren't aware that they're not spiritually alive yet. They haven't had that experience or that conversion.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to push that away, especially today with all the new age and spirituality concepts that we have floating around. They don't want to go and do the hard work. The dying daily is like, take that sentence out. We're not doing that. It's got to be nice, rosy, and all lovey-dovey and fun all the time. Well, that's not how it really works.
You're absolutely right. And that goes back to something we've probably brought up in a couple of shows, that, everybody's chasing those rainbows, unicorns, and bliss all the time.
Yes.
Well, once I start getting spiritual, my life is going to be nothing but bliss. And that any spiritual being, any spiritual life, any spiritual, whether you want to call them a saint or a wisdom figure or an enlightened being, if you look at their lives, wasn't filled with pleasure and bliss all the time.
Right.
And so walking this walk means you're going to go through some difficulties, but your spiritual practices are going to help you get through those difficulties a little bit better. A little bit more strength.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of this outlook that, much of the world is spiritually dead, I definitely grasp that concept. And I do see now, though, that there are people that are searching. There are people that seem to be hungry, but it's like they don't really take it all the way, or they don't put as much effort as Christ is saying you need to put, where God should be your main focus, your only focus, and that should be your ideal, is striving to that. And so they take it to a certain length, and then they're like happy. They've like content, but there's so much deeper they can go with their practice. In fact, within Buddhist tradition, they say that there's two problems with the spiritual path. One is not starting, not getting on it.
Right.
Just living materialistically, living in this world of Maya, getting so caught up in this, and just this is the way you live, and you don't really care about any spiritual depth at all. So you never get on the path. That's the one problem. But the second problem is once you're on it, not going all the way.
Right.
And so those, they say, are the two big problems for the spiritual walk. Either not starting, or not going all the way. And so there's levels to spirituality. Yes. I also believe that, Christ's statement, in my Father's house are many mansions. I believe that means there's many levels to spiritual growth and consciousness and all these sort of things. And so it's always a continual work to truly spiritualize ourselves. So there's so much depth in many of these traditions and practices that we could go.
Exactly. And why would you even want to do this? I mean, life's already, just as a creature, as a human being, normal. Life's going to be difficult and full of all kinds of stuff you're going to have to deal with. Why not step into that power that you have, that gift you have inside of you, energize that, and have assistance with this life?
Right.
So that even if it's difficult, it's not as hard, or you're given insights and your life takes on a different flavor of, a problem doesn't come at you as a problem like it used to.
Yeah.
You realize it's just a challenge and it's going to be figured out. And it does. Like I was telling you earlier, I've had situations where my life's just like anybody else's, but when I go to do things, I have an intuitive guidance with just the mundane things that helps me do those in a way that flow quickly and easily. Whereas I see other people trying to do similar or the same things, and they're over there throwing things at the wall and cussing and yeah, and they don't have to do all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I would say this is a better way.
Right.
But most people want to fight that and negate it.
Right.
And they don't really know what God is.
Yep. Which is a big point. But I think we need to take a quick break here for some quick messages. Thank you so much for continuing to watch and listen, and we'll stay tuned with us as we return after these messages. Welcome back to Conscious Conversations. We're here having a conversation about Jesus' teaching on let the dead bury the dead. And what does this sort of mean? And we started with saying how some scholars say that it's a statement by Christ to always put God first, even beyond responsibilities of this world, and make that the primary focus. But right before the break, you brought up a good point. Because many people say, all right, I'm going to put God first.
Right.
But then you just made a comment that you said many people don't even know what God is.
Exactly.
And so if you put it first, it's hard to really strive to it if you don't have a understanding of what this entity is.
Exactly. I mean, I went for many years thinking it was a guy on a cloud somewhere looking down at me, writing all my stuff.
Yeah, making the list.
Making a list, checking it twice. Almost like Santa Claus in a sense. Yeah. And it was always outside of myself. But when I started pulling this in deeper in a personal experience, you begin to realize that's one of the things that you need to figure out is what is God to you, not what a book told you, not what a group of people presented to you. Go and find for yourself deep on the inside.
Absolutely.
You know, surrender and get very vulnerable and let that part of you be expressed to you.
Yes.
I have some people running around saying, I am God. And don't be so foolish. But if you go into the silence and you hear a voice come back to you and says, I am God, you're making the connection.
Right.
So don't get caught up in that other side of it. And when I heard this scripture, let the dead bury the dead, I was like, why would an ascended master make such a crazy statement?
Yeah.
But when you start putting it into context. When you start putting it into context, it starts to make sense that a lot of us think we're just instant spiritual.
Right.
Oh, I went out and seen the Grand Canyon. Ooh, it was a spiritual experience. Well, it was a great experience, but I got news for you. I don't think you were touching the eternal heavens with that.
We're totally transformed.
Exactly.
There has to, in my opinion, in 2 cents, when you truly have a spiritual experience, you're transformed from the inside out.
Absolutely. Those things were given to you to enjoy but not become attached to.
Right.
A totally wonderful experience, not negating that whatsoever.
Right.
But there's a deeper walk in this life. There's a deeper power within you that you can access within you and manifest and demonstrate. But you have to surrender. You have to die daily. You have to let go of the things that are blocking it. And most people just think, well, I'm just instantly spiritual because now I'm a good person and I love God and the world's full of roses and everything's great and I'm going to make sure it stays that way. That's not the spirituality he was talking about.
No.
I mean,
and there's also some people that think, well, you know what? Well, that was Jesus. He could know God intimately because he's like the boss's son, and none of us could ever amount to that. But that's not his message either.
Exactly.
His message was that the kingdom of God is within you, and, those who do the work of God are my brothers and sisters. So he was equating himself with the people that were really trying to motivate and direct their life and funnel everything they're doing towards God.
Exactly. He said, of my own self, I can do nothing.
Right.
Well, when you read that, like, why is the Son of God saying such a statement? Well, he was trying to show that this is for everyone across the board, like we said many times before. But we've been talked out of this. Yeah. Our society has structured this so that it becomes a controlling thing. And that's why most people, when they hear that God word, they just want to throw you up against the wall and say, oh, I'm not listening to you anymore because you're just totally ignorant.
All right.
Which is not true. They don't know that deeper experience that I'm talking about, or they've chosen not to pursue it.
Right, right.
And they go off into the physicality of this world and distract themselves and chase things that have no power.
Yeah, that are dead.
Yes, and they unknowingly become idol worshipers and all these different diversions that they giving so much power over them when it flat says in the book, you've been given dominion over everything.
Right.
It was an all-inclusive statement. That wasn't just pieces and parts. That was the whole board.
Yeah.
So the minute you act like something else has more power over you to make your life different, that's an object, you've stepped way out of left field.
Right.
Now, if it helps you become more receptive to a deeper walk or deeper energy within you, and you go on and develop that,
Yeah.
I can see where that can help.
Right.
But to say that it's something special outside of you and over you, you're totally getting off tangent.
Correct. So I believe that everything is useful up to a point.
Yes.
And so there's, just like we were saying before, I believe there's depth and different levels of spirituality. So as you're walking this path, there are things that can help you, as you're progressing, but eventually all those things begin to fall away, and you need to realize that anything outside of you is really unnecessary. It's all about a power and a greatness that is already within that we can tap into. And while those things can help to awaken us, there is a time where those things eventually need to be let go. Even, again, bringing in some of the Eastern philosophy, the Buddha himself said his teaching was only a raft that would take you from one side of the river to the other.
Right.
But then once you got to the other side of the river, you wouldn't pick up that raft and then carry it with you all along the land, because the raft was only useful to get you from one end of the river to the other. So even he said his teaching at some point would need to be let go of, because it would only get you as far as you want to go, but then there's the rest you got to do on your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of inner work.
Right. And that's not easy.
Yeah.
And that's why you brought up the statement before, but Jesus said the way to life is narrow. Narrow is the gate that leads to life, and few there are that find it.
Right.
And if we bring in some of the teaching of the East, the Bhagavad Gita, it says that one out of every 1,000 really goes searching for God. But out of those 1 out of every 1,000, it's really only a rare one and a dedicated one that finds him. And so that's just showing you how much real effort it's really going to take. If you really want to have that deep inner experience of really spiritualizing yourself and knowing the deep connection you have with God and life and all of the totality of everything. It's a hard path to walk, but it's when you're dedicated to it, it will lead you to a priceless treasure.
Exactly. And you're not by yourself in this in this walk. And it does get easier because you start to learn to let go of the things that are blocking this power that lifts you up,
right,
that actually hold you and helps you understand things in a deeper and better way. And most people don't stick around long enough for that to actually start manifesting.
Yeah.
Or they just get to the point of just being a good person and think that's all I need to do. And
right,
they never feel the actual power. There's more to that. So they don't get the full experience. And
that's a great point. And I also think that's why Christ, in many people, he would call them out about what they were doing, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He'd say, you're just running through the rituals,
right,
but you're really dead inside. So again, he was calling them like spiritually dead, because you're not giving any life to what you're doing. You're not really practicing this for, the real devotion to God. You're just running through these rituals so maybe people see you doing it.
Right.
You stand out and you pray to be of show and all these sort of things. And when you're doing things in that sort of way, what you're doing is dead. It has no life, or it's not going to bring you to deeper life.
Just want to be seen of men. He said your righteousness needs to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees.
Right.
You go back and study history, those are the most strictest, devoutest people of the time that you'll ever run into. They went by every word and letter in the law. I mean, down to the point of total anal insanity.
Right.
And yet that wasn't enough because they were doing it within themselves under the old law.
Yeah.
And Christ come along and, gave the Sermon on the Mount and said, hey, you're living under grace now. Step into this level of consciousness and awareness and have this energy fill you and start a different walk.
Right.
It took me a long time to get over the fact that God wasn't mad at me because I wasn't doing everything I thought I should do right. It took a long time to get to that point. I mean, because you get a little grudge thinking this guy is watching you in the sky and he's looking at everything that when you don't measure up, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
That's not happening. I'm
No.
sorry. It's just not.
It just loves you unconditionally.
Absolutely.
With all warts and all that we think we have. Yeah.
But that story doesn't work real well for the control level of our social interactions in our society of, I got to make sure you stay being a good person. So something's got to intimidate you. And that's what they've used it for. And that's never been the message.
Right.
This is like life and life more abundantly. And
Yeah.
most of us don't get to that point where we experience that.
Right. And I believe it's the devotion of love that really allows like a magnetic force between us and God to really awaken us to that deep level of spiritual realization that we can come to. And, when we do focus on make God the primary focus of our lives with sincere love and devotion, a whole new world does really open up to us magically.
Right. Well, you step out of the self-preservation, fearful ego mindset consciousness that tries to make itself a God.
Right.
And you step over into the spiritual part of yourself that's about abundance and love and connection. And it's a flowing to this.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive to your mind because you have to surrender and allow.
Yeah.
And then all this stuff happens. It's almost like you surrender and allow the sun to shine. You don't have any influence on it. And it does a great job. Well, that's how this works. It flows on its own. It has its own orders and power that comes through you.
Yes.
And people, that's counterintuitive, whereas the ego wants you to figure it out.
Right.
You've got to write down your plan. You got to make your goals. You got to make it happen and struggle.
Yeah.
And, you're just on another edge of a struggle when you succeed. Oh, I've got to this plateau.
Right.
But you're burning yourself out. That's not how life was intended to be for you.
No,
ever.
Not at all. And I think we're going to have to stop here for today. But for more information on this, you made a really...
Yeah, I made a really good post on this on Facebook in our
dead
group.
Bury the dead.
Yeah, in our group and on the Invisible Greatness page and the Conscious Conversations group.
Yeah.
And I went real deep with it because spirit flows through me when I'm writing.
Okay.
So I can put the words together a lot better when I'm doing it that way because I'm coming from somewhere else. Go and read that post and you'll really get a real good soundbite on what we're trying to get across to you today.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. So if you go to Conscious Conversations Facebook page, you can read it there. But we thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you. We love you. Please leave your comments below on what Let the Dead Bury the Dead means to you. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a blessed and beautiful day. God bless you all.